Help me, South Africa. My name is Tintswalo and I'm at a crossroad. Born in the wake of democracy, I represent the hopes, dreams, and future of South Africa. The name Mercy was chosen for me by those who failed to recognize that I'm more than a beneficiary of compassion, charity, or pity. Mercy was never meant to be my deliverer from poverty's clutches. It wasn't mercy that was intended to cleanse the stains of indignity, nor was it mercy that was expected to remove the shackles of oppression. As I introduce myself, in a world shadowed by suffering and oppression, where dispossession and exploitation linger, where poverty and inequality prevail, I was born to claim liberty and emancipation, justice and transformation, prosperity and hope. In the land of my forefathers, this was my birthright. My great-grandparents worked this land, lost everything in it as they were torn from its embrace. My grandparents worked this land, their blood mingling with the dust before it was stripped from their hands. My parents, too, worked this land, poured their sweat and tears in it, only to have its fruits taken from them. Yes, liberty and emancipation, justice and transformation, prosperity and hope are my birthright. Every April, my mother weaves a tale not just of labor, but of liberation that rivaled the creation of life itself. To her, the sensation was like a melody played on a double-edged sword. She cradled not just the imminent arrival of her child, but also the dawn of a new South Africa, emerging like a placenta, rich with hope, freedom, and joy. In her story, I hear not just the echoes of a mother's love, but the heartbeat of a country awaiting its deliverance. For 30 years, my mother and I are still pregnant with a new South Africa. We're still expecting true reconciliation and unity. We're still expecting economic growth and distribution of wealth. We are still expecting quality education and healthcare. 30 years later, my mother waits to release the placenta, and I wait for my birthright. We wait to regain the land that was torn, stripped, and taken from generations of our people. We wait for the dignity of affordable housing and decent infrastructure. We wait for the safe and secure embrace of the motherland. As we lose grip on the hopes, dreams, and future of South Africa, we confront a stark reality. Mercy is absent. This is the legacy I must pass down to my children, a narrative of a home designed to anchor me in poverty, where my struggles are not just visible but highlighted, advertised for all to see. A narrative of living on planned scarcity, where water and electricity grace our homes only in fleeting visits, as if to mock our hopes. A narrative of threads woven from grants, mercy's deceptive gift. Not lifelines, but masks of broken promises. My children will hear of the pride mercy takes in pricing me out of quality education through systems designed to limit, not uplift. They will hear how mercy presented soup, bread, and tea as the pinnacles of nutrition at school. They will hear of the fact that mercy destined me to the lowest form of education through financial aid that I had to fight for. Yes, I've sketched new lines in my story, started a family, moved into a better house, and live a better life. Yet this semblance of progress, this shadow of dignity, barely brushes against the canvas of decency. The mercy that fell on me disguised prejudices, inequality, and clothed corruption in empowerment. Enough of the shadows cast by mercy's partial light. My name is Tintswalo, a name given to me by those who failed to recognize that I am more than a beneficiary of compassion, humanity, or pity. I am Tintswalo. I deserve liberty, emancipation, justice and transformation, prosperity and hope. I am Tintswalo. I deserve better. I deserve a government that invites me to do more together and not turn around and leave me jobless, with no water and no lights, and at the raw end of corruption. I deserve a government that will defend, not obliterate, our strides to heal history's wounds with its empty vows to rescue South Africa. I deserve a government that will not buy land, jobs, and lives with the blood, sweat, and tears of the people. I am Tintswalo. I deserve better. I find myself at a crossroad, having to choose between the familiar yet daunting presence of the known challenges, the anxiety of returning to a state of oppression, and the overwhelming fear of losing that all that has been painstakingly worked for.
Hi everyone, I'm Naledi. I'll be here as a guest today, but this is our pilot episode and our main character is Faith. Hi Faith.
Hi, Naledi.
Yeah, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. So thank you for having me first of all.
It's a pleasure.
So I think majority of what we're going to do today is just a Q&A, just to get a grip of what this is about. This will be our first episode of the Hearts and Hands podcast, right? And Faith will be answering a few questions about one, her piece, and two, herself as a person and the inspiration behind the podcast, right? So first question, straight to the point. So what was your inspiration for this piece?
So, at the beginning of the year, the President of the Republic of South Africa delivered the State of the Nation address. And because this is 30 years into our democracy as South Africa, he highlighted the successes of the government since 1994. The ruling party has been in power since 1994, since the wake of democracy. And it was a way for the ruling party to celebrate the 30 years and what they feel they've achieved in the 30 years, all the policies and all the laws that have changed and the systems that have changed. And they came up with this character named Tintswalo. And in them coming up with Tintswalo, they were trying to highlight the achievements of the ANC-led government. The ANC-led government that was able to provide RDP houses, ANC-led government that through the NSFAS grants, students are able to go to university. Through the ANC-led government, children are able to go to no-fee schools. All policies like that were just highlighted by this character named Tintswalo. But when you listen to the speech and you listen to who Tintswalo is described to be, I don't think many of us can relate. I, for one, thought, but this can't be it. Can't Tintswalo be a lot more?
Someone else.
Why should Tintswalo be confined to an RDP house? 30 years ago, or even maybe because there were teething problems in the earlier years of our democracy, 20 years ago maybe, could we not have given Tintswalo's parents better opportunities so that Tintswalo would not have to grow up in an RDP house, have to go to it's a no-fee paying school, but what is the quality of the education that Tintswalo is receiving? He spoke also about the school nutrition program that gives food to learners in those schools. but do we really call it nutrition? If you're going to go into those schools, I know when I was young, I went to one of those schools, a couple of years of my early primary school life, and it's basically bread. What I remember was bread, a cup of soup, and sometimes tea, sometimes lightly diluted juice. But how much nutrition is that providing to Tintswalo? Is that brain food for Tintswalo to be able to do better? And then you look at the education system itself, the quality of the education that these no-fee schools are providing. Is that good enough for Tintswalo to go out and be something better than what her parents were forced to be? No, I feel like we cannot be proud. Yes, the policies are doing something. We've seen a lot of changes. Yes, we are proud of where we are now compared to where we come from pre 1994. But is it really enough? Is it something that we can really pat ourselves in the backs for? I don't think so.
I get that. But do you think also, as South Africa being one of the younger democracies in Africa, especially Southern Africa, do you think that this story applies to more than just South Africa?
I think in Africa, this story will apply to most of our countries because we seem to not be able to come out of those teething problems. We seem to be babies who we come out of the mother's womb, we crawl, and we're still crawling.
Struggling.
I really do not get why we should still be crawling. When do we start walking as a country, as a continent? When do we start walking? When other countries are running, we're still crawling.
Yeah, so I think looking at several of our countries, we have been colonized, and a lot of us have still suffered with the injustices of things like apartheid. In your opinion, what do you think injustices like that have colored our experiences as Black people in Africa and as people who have gained independence and not really known what to do with it or how to handle it properly?
So I think the colonization and apartheid, for example, have really broken a lot of people. One, you are told by not just people, you are told by systems, you are told by laws that you are inferior. You are told that you deserve nothing more than just the bare minimum, sometimes nothing. And you grow up like that, and you give birth to children, and you must teach them that compared to this kind of a person, you are inferior. It takes a lot in the person, within a person, in the mind, even within your soul, to get rid of those things, because it just sort of comes in as doctrines that have been instilled in us as Black people. You are inferior. Then we come in and we find freedom. Yes, we are free, but I don't think we've done a very good job of really dealing with what we were told as Black people, as the ones who were colonized. We have not really dealt with those things that we were made to believe about ourselves. And it's not just, like I'm saying, that you are told by your boss when you are working as a domestic worker from Alex to Santon. It's the laws, like laws that tell you cannot own land as a Black person. You cannot buy land as a Black person. And you come in and you are told you are now free, but no one really removes all of these things from you. There is no rehabilitation at all. And then with that, in South Africa, we speak a lot about the unity and the hopes that we see. I remember my parents would tell me when I was born, Nelson Mandela was coming out of prison, the sense of freedom that everyone felt. But like you're saying, we really don't know what to do with that independence and that freedom. As a country, yes, we are free, we are independent, but really, because the mind has not changed, we're still so dependent, which is why we can't move forward.
Yeah, so I think being in the mindset of being a person who is oppressed and not was oppressed, there's a lot that goes into the kind of leadership we have. And I think it's good, maybe we can touch on what you think those injustices have done to the kind of style of leadership that we have now, and how we are running our own countries for ourselves and not for others. Because I feel in Africa specifically, our leadership tends to be of a mindset that doesn't conform to assisting people as opposed to assisting yourself a lot of the time. So I don't know, what do you think the mindset has kind of done to our leaders specifically?
Like I said earlier, I feel like we are broken and we are led by broken leaders. You'll find in political leadership, a lot of the people, although they are slowly moving out of the system, are those who had to fight, those who had to be exiled, and they were directly involved in that struggle to get us our freedom. And I feel like the brokenness within them sort of tells me I must go and steal in order to have something. I must, because I've never had, I need to hog all of it to make sure that for a lifetime I will have, for a lifetime my children will have, and we forget about the people that we are leading. When this whole thing started, if you see in history what our leaders were fighting for before 1994 or before democracy, there was heart, there was love for the people. And now they've become so selfish, and in my opinion, it mostly comes from the fear of losing it again, that you become so selfish and you get blinded by, I need to take care of me, and you forget to take care of the people that you are leading.
Great. So this is an election year for South Africa. I think we're about 10 days away. Yes, so I don't know if you've been listening to the kinds of conversations people are having. I would like to know also, what kind of conversations do you think have been dominant leading up to this election, and what do you think those conversations will do to the outcome?
So lately, also going back to the fact that this is 30 years of democracy, and the fact that a lot of what our government has achieved, according to them, a lot of people cannot relate to. I've heard a lot of conversations around what are they talking about? This Tintswalo person is just an illusion. We can't relate to Tintswalo, and we are sort of in a time where we feel like the government has not really done much. There are those who feel the government has not done anything at all for them. I don't completely agree with that. There's a lot that has been done. Like I said earlier, it's just not enough. So people are really now talking about the need for change, the need for us to choose a government that fully represents us and our interests as the general public, a government that truly represents the people, without the shadows and the blankets of corruption, without all of that. But then again, in the same conversation, the confusion now comes in. Who is able to do that?
Yeah.
Is there anyone that we are seeing in the political space who's going to do that? When you think of one party as, okay, they are extreme left, if we go with this one, you hear people talking, if we go with this one, we are going down as a country. Our country is going to be destroyed. Another set of people will be saying, but if we then choose this other party, then it means we might be going back to what we've been fighting before.
Yeah.
So it's things like that that we need to, yes, talk about. But at this point, we really need to make conscious decisions as to who we are choosing to lead us as a country. And I think also the one conversation that is very dominant is that the ANC government, being the ruling party, the ANC is going to be losing majority seats in parliament, and for the first time in history since our democracy, it's going to be a very tight one, and they might not get the 50% seats in parliament. And that is really going to change the political landscape. If that happens, it means we're going into a coalition government. Again, it's the first time in our history as South Africa to have that coalition government. How then does that play into policy making and lawmaking going forward with all the divisions that we see? It's going to be an interesting one.
Let's hope it doesn't turn into one we're not liking the outcome of. Yeah, so I think for the young people watching this show, I think an important part of talking about politics and talking about our social structures is kind of figuring out what our leadership story is. I think for us, we're relatively young in theory, but I do think it's important we also talk to younger people about the kinds of qualities they should embody when they aspire to become leaders. So what do you think is an important part of becoming a leader, and what qualities should everybody embrace when they choose to commit to these roles?
For me personally, I strongly believe that leadership starts with love. If you don't have love within yourself, please do not be a leader, because you cannot lead and represent a people that you do not have love for, which is what is wrong in our country, in our continent. We have leaders who just do not have love. Love, in my opinion, again, conquers all. I think we've heard that. There is a lot that we are able to resolve just by loving the people. It's the difference between choosing wrong and right. You are driven by love to choose right for the good of the people. You choose to be selfless rather than selfish and corrupt because you love the people. That's the one most important thing that I feel every leader should have: love for the people.
It's a great one. And I do think also just that transparency is necessary, because we may love people, but we're also not honest with ourselves as to our motivations. So it's important to always, I think, keep that in mind as well. So what do you think would be the ultimate positive outcome for young people in South Africa to vote for somebody who they appreciate and feel loves them? What do you think you'll see in young people change if they make the right choice this election?
I don't think that we can rely a lot on the people that we choose. I think that we need to choose people who represent us, so that everything that is law, everything that is policy in the country represents the good of the people, so that we are able to get the opportunities that we have been crying for. We should be given the environment. That environment should be created by the people that we are choosing. We are now in a generation of people who are so much more intelligent. No offense to the previous generations, but people who are so much more intelligent, so much more forward thinking, so much more in tune with everything that is happening, so much more innovative in their approach in everything that they do in everyday life, so much more willing and longing for that unity and togetherness, and to just be a people who are together. We need to choose a people or leaders that will allow us or give us that environment to thrive in that environment and be that better South Africa in that environment, especially as young people. At the same time, we need as a people to start doing things ourselves. we need to be less dependent on this government. Yes, we will choose them. Yes, they must create that environment for us. But we also need to create those opportunities when we don't see them happening. If you are going to be asking your government to create 100 jobs, month one goes by, there is nothing that is announced on what they're planning to do. Month two, there's no movement. Month three, you need to start picking yourself up, considering the kind of generation that we are now. Start doing something and create the 10, have somebody else create another 10. We come together, we will get to those 100 that we are asking for. We need to stop this full, complete reliance on the government. Again, the 30 years have proven that they cannot do it on their own. Yes, they must represent us so that every effort that we make as well as the general public yields fruit. But we need to do it ourselves too.
I get that. A lot of self-reliance coming from everybody, and I think as communities being together in improving our lives. So I think South Africa was one of the first countries I had ever seen do a peace and reconciliation, right? And I think Nelson Mandela was the lead of that. I was very young at the time, but I felt those were very important moments in Africa's history. Seeing white people and black people hug each other and say, I'm sorry for the things I did. How can we, especially in South Africa, I think the differences are greater here. How can we start to embrace the past without stirring up bitterness and begin the road to finding real peace amongst each other as races?
Okay, so the peace and reconciliation, that whole process was a great way of us moving forward as South Africans of all color. And there's a phrase in our coat of arms, I think it's in Khoisan, it says Ike Ikara Ike. It means unity in diversity. And that is the kind of South Africa that was envisioned throughout that peace and reconciliation process. But I feel like we didn't go to the very last step, because you still find the divisions. You still find, even on social media, post something random with someone of your color, and it's perceived a certain way by someone of the opposite or different, not opposite, different race. And it sometimes you feel like it's really not that deep.
That's serious.
But it's something that does not come from systems anymore. It comes from within us as a people. We have not healed. We have not moved past what has happened. Again, it is also because we are not taught well enough of what has happened in the past. There is a lot that has been distorted also in the education system when it comes to our history as black people. It has not been taught enough to us as black people, but also our white friends have not been taught enough of our history so that they understand what exactly has happened and why we should be moving together as a people out of all of that. We have not been taught to embrace that as our history, not as something that defines us as a people, but as a history, as something that shows where we come from, for us to start hoping for something better and start moving towards that something better. And because of those gaps in the education of where we come from as a people, we are not able to move forward properly because we just don't have that full understanding. You will sit with someone of a different race and find that you really do not understand each other, and the divisions that you see are because of really small things. But education, I think, is the first step that we need to take to teach everyone of what was South Africa, what was it for black people, what was it for white people, what is it now, what is it meant to be, so that we all know how to move. At this point, I feel like We know where we want to go, but we don't know how. And we're not open enough because we just have so many fears and we are so paranoid about each other and what we feel the next person of a different race is going to react to me as a person. So it's really those things that need to be taken care from within ourselves. We need that healing because we are dealing with systems that 30 years is not a very long time.
No, it's not.
There are people who are still alive now who
Were there when things were bad.
they were there. They experienced all of it. And they are telling these stories to their children. And those children are telling those stories to their children. And all of that without the full picture is creating hatred, animosity. But if we are to get the full picture of what this whole thing is, where we're going, it's going to create this unity that we keep talking about.
Great. You said unity in diversity, right? Zambia, we have one Zambia, one nation. So I think coming together in our diverse groups also is an important part. Developing slogans and talking to each other about what our lives have been and what our experiences have been as people has been an important point in being able to share these conversations and being able to share them without a personal bias, right? And I keep going back to it being an election year because I'm personally so excited. I've not followed any election as much as this one outside my home country. So what would be your message to the average voter? Because I remember the first election I took part in. I had no idea what I was doing. And I was so excited by a campaign song. Honestly, you couldn't have paid me to be as excited about that campaign song. And looking back, I think I cast my vote in ignorance. And I think a lot of young people now will be so excited seeing celebrities, seeing people making endorsements, seeing the government for the first time in your life showing up to your doorstep and saying, give me your vote. So what would your message be to the average voter? What should we know? What should they know about this election and how to cast their vote and to have a clear picture of what your future will be like? What things should you consider when you make your vote?
First of all, young people like myself, your vote cannot be bought by anything, by anyone. Again, it's about you choosing leaders who represent you, they represent your interest. No one can come to you and say, because I'm giving you this now, vote for me, and you go for it and you fall for it. You need to be thinking about, for the next 5 years, I'm going to be stuck with this government. Will this government represent me? When I need access to education, will this government be there? When I need access to land as a black farmer, will this government represent me? Will I be able to get that? When I need power, I need water, is this government going to be able to give me these things? When I need to roam around freely in my country, have equal access to the benefits of living in this country, is this government going to be able to give me that? Am I able to go to the major cities and buy property, no restrictions, no hassle, because I can afford it? Will I be able to do that through the policies that this government has? So it's things like that we need to consider. Do they represent me? I was very disappointed one day. I was at a traffic light and it was pamphlet season, and one party came, and because of the color of my skin, I didn't get a pamphlet. So I'm asking myself, you don't want me to vote for you, or you feel my vote maybe will be of no value. You don't even want to try and convince me of what you're able to do for me so that I can vote for you. How then will you represent me for 5 years? And also think about other parties that are buying votes with basically, if I can call it deceit. You know that it's just not going to happen when you're looking at it. You're telling me you're going to give people this much money because they're unemployed. Where's the money going to come from? Who then suffers for that 5 years while you are in power?
Who funds it?
Who is going to be suffering? It means my parents, the working class, whoever is going to suffer. We need to be considering all of those things and weigh our options. I think now you can find wrong in all of these political parties. There's so much that when I read manifestos, it's just, wow, I don't think I want you in government for 5 years. With all of them. There's no one party in this country that I find perfect. But we need to find one that will represent us as a people, or you as an individual. Find one that represents you to your very core, to the very little things they need to represent you.
Great. So I don't know if you have any closing messages. I think my questions are done. It was an interesting chat though. I do think we could have done with an earlier time having these conversations last year maybe, to kind of sit down and do the build up of elections and figure out where we're going with this. So any closing messages?
Just one thing. Let us please go into this with your eyes open. This is not to tell you who to vote for, who is wrong, who is right, but just choose wisely and consider how your life should be in the next 5 years. Consider who you want to be sitting in parliament, who do you want to be making laws, and what kind of a South Africa do you want to see. We also need to start having these light conversations about these things. There are a lot of us, me included, who don't have full understanding of politics, and we are just not that interested in going into the politics. But there are things that affect us in politics, and at the same time, there are things that we can impact into politics without really going into politics. We need to start thinking about those things. Law and policy is made for the people. I know that most of the time there are consultations with the people. We need to be involved in those things.
Every step of the way.
Yes, so that you don't find yourself just in limbo. You're just riding a boat. You don't know where it's going. You don't know how far it's going to take you. You don't even know when you wake up the next morning, how does the political state of a country affect you. It is not proper for us as young people to remove ourselves from these conversations. It's not proper for us to remove ourselves from what we are able to influence. Also, what we have been failing to do as a country, as a continent, is holding our leaders accountable. We see things, we murmur about them, we just complain in our little corners, and nobody holds anyone accountable. I know in other countries, if the lights go off for 2 hours, someone is losing their seat.
Yeah.
Someone is just out in the cold. And I'm not saying that that's the extreme end we should go, but let's hold our leaders accountable. There are things that we should not be accepting, and the fact that we've been accepting them for 30 years is rather painful.
Understood. So I think having these conversations and maybe starting somewhere is always a good place. And thank you again for having me.
Thank you.
It's been a crazy trip here, but I appreciate the time and the effort. To everybody watching, thank you so much. Like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Learn something new, and catch us next episode.